He was seconds from walking out the door forever, fired, humiliated, and carrying a 5-year-old's lunchbox in a shaking hand, when the most powerful woman in the building grabbed his sleeve and whispered 3 words that changed everything. "Please, don't go." No one in that office knew what she was about to reveal. No one knew that the CEO everyone feared was about to show the one thing she'd hidden for 10 years, and that a broke, exhausted single father was the only person on earth she trusted enough to see it. Before we dive into this story, if you believe in the quiet power of kindness, the kind that shows up in ordinary moments and changes everything, hit that subscribe button and tap the like icon. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from today. This channel is called Kindness Waves, and every single week we bring you true-to-life stories about compassion, second chances, and the small acts that ripple out further than we ever imagined. Now, let's begin. Daniel Reyes had learned, over the last 3 years, exactly how loud silence could be. It was loud at 6 in the morning when he packed his daughter Mia's lunch, and the apartment was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. It was loud at night when he sat on the edge of her bed after she fell asleep, doing the math on his phone calculator for the 100th time, trying to make $4,000 stretch into 5. And it was loud now, standing outside the glass doors of Callaway Tower in downtown Chicago, in a suit he'd ironed at 4 in the morning, waiting to hear whether he still had a job. He was 34 years old. 2 years ago, he'd been a rising operations manager at a mid-sized logistics firm, married, hopeful, building something that looked like a future. Then his wife, Elena, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, and in 14 months, Daniel went from husband to widower to single father, all while learning the names of medications he wished he'd never had to pronounce. He sold a car. He sold the wedding ring he wasn't ready to sell, but needed to. He moved himself and Mia into a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, and he took the only job that would still have him after 11 months of unexplained gaps in hospital visits during work hours. A warehouse logistics coordinator at Callaway Freight & Trade, working under a CEO whose reputation walked into rooms before she did. Her name was Vivian Callaway, 39 years old, sharp-suited, eyesight in meetings, famous in industry magazines for turning a struggling regional freight company into a $400 million logistics empire in under a decade. People said she'd fired her own cousin for missing a deadline. People said she hadn't taken a single vacation day in 6 years. People said a lot of things about Vivian Callaway, and almost none of them were kind. Daniel had crossed paths with her maybe 4 times in 8 months, always in passing, always feeling like a piece of furniture that happened to be standing in a hallway. So when he got the email that morning, "Please report to the executive floor conference room at 9 a.m., his stomach dropped the way it had dropped in hospital waiting rooms. He knew what corporate language like that usually meant. He was right in a way. The company was restructuring the logistics division. Layoffs were coming. And Daniel, quiet, competent, but with a file full of medical leave requests and a manager who'd never quite warmed to him, was on the list. The meeting lasted 6 minutes. A man named Griggs from HR read from a paper without looking up, used the words "difficult decision" and "wish you the best," and slid a manila envelope across the table. Daniel didn't argue. He'd learned that arguing rarely changed anything. It just cost you your dignity on the way out. He nodded, shook a hand that didn't want to be shaken, and walked toward the elevator with Mia's lunchbox, which he'd forgotten to leave at his desk that morning, some superstition telling him to keep it close, swinging from his fingers. He was halfway to the elevator when a voice stopped him. Not loud, almost fragile. "Wait." He turned, and there she was, Vivian Callaway, in her signature charcoal blazer, standing in the doorway of her private office, one hand braced on the frame like she needed it to stay upright. Her face, the face that had stared down boardrooms and Wall Street reporters, looked different. Pale, uncertain, human, in a way Daniel had never seen it. "Please," she said again, quieter this time, glancing down the hallway to make sure no one else was near. "Don't go yet. Come inside, just for a moment." Daniel almost said no. He had a bus to catch, a daughter to pick up from his neighbor's apartment, a mountain of forms to fill out for unemployment before the office closed. But something in her voice, a crack he couldn't place, made him step inside. She closed the door behind them, and for a long moment, She just stood there, her hand pressed flat against her own chest like she was holding something in. Then she said the words that would follow Daniel for the rest of his life. "I know what it's like to lose everything and have to keep smiling like it doesn't hurt," she told him then, haltingly, like each sentence cost her something, about a version of herself that almost no one in that building knew existed. 10 years ago, before Callaway Freight was worth anything, before the magazine covers, Vivian had been a 29-year-old single mother herself. Her son, Theo, had been born with a heart condition that required 3 surgeries before his 4th birthday. She had worked 2 jobs, slept in hospital chairs, and built her company late at night on a laptop with a cracked screen, driven by nothing but the terror of not being able to pay for the next surgery. Theo was healthy now, 17, thriving, living with Vivian's sister in Seattle because Vivian herself, ashamed to admit it even to her own reflection, had thrown herself so completely into building the company that saved her son's life that she'd lost the ability to be present in his. She hadn't seen him in person in 4 months. She'd built an empire and lost her family piece by piece to do it, and she had never told a single person at Callaway Freight, not her board, not her assistant of 9 years, that any of it had ever happened. "I saw your file this morning," she told Daniel, her voice steadying now, though her eyes were glassy. "Before the meeting, I saw the leave requests, the dates. I looked them up. They match a hospital's oncology unit. I know what those weeks look like from the inside, Daniel. I live them, and I let a room full of people decide your future without even asking what you'd survived to still show up every single day." Daniel didn't know what to say. He stood there holding Mia's lunchbox, a stranger's confession hanging in the air between them, and felt something loosen in his chest that had been clenched tight for 2 years. "I'm not asking for pity," he finally said. "I just needed the job to keep the lights on. That's all it ever was." "I know," Vivian said. "That's exactly why I'm not letting this decision stand." She walked to her desk, picked up her phone, and in front of him called Griggs from HR and told him, in a voice that had gone steel firm again, that the layoff was rescinded effective immediately, and that she wanted a meeting in 20 minutes to discuss why a father who had shown up to every shift during his wife's final year of life had been the first name cut instead of the last. But it didn't end there. That was the part of the story that made the news later, the small human moment nobody expected from Vivian Callaway. What came after was the part that changed both their lives. Over the following weeks, something shifted inside the walls of Callaway Freight. Vivian, for the first time in a decade, started asking questions she'd never asked before. Not about quarterly numbers, but about her people. She asked HR to review every recent layoff for anyone who'd been navigating a health crisis, a death in the family, a divorce. 12 people, it turned out, had similar stories to Daniel's, quietly struggling, quietly punished for it. She reversed 8 of those decisions and personally called each employee. She started a program, informally at first, that employees began calling the Whisper Fund, a confidential emergency support system where any Callaway employee facing a medical crisis, childcare emergency, or sudden loss could apply for paid leave extensions and financial assistance without it touching their performance record. She funded the first year of it herself, out of her own salary, not the company's marketing budget where PR usually liked these things filed. She didn't do it for a press release. In fact, she asked that it not be publicized at all. It leaked anyway, the way real kindness sometimes does when a grateful employee posts something online that goes further than anyone intended. Daniel, for his part, kept showing up. He didn't ask for anything more than his job back, but something about that conversation in the office had cracked something open in him too. He started noticing the other people around him the way Vivian hadn't noticed him. The guy on the loading dock who kept coming in with the same worn-out shoes through a Chicago winter. The young mother in accounts payable who never took her lunch break because she was saving the money to bus home faster to her kids. He started small. He left a pair of steel-toed boots, still in the box, on the loading dock guy's shelf with no note. He covered a shift so the young mother could make her son's school play. Kindness, he was learning, wasn't a single dramatic gesture. It was a habit, a muscle, something you built one small choice at a time. 6 months later, Vivian did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She flew to Seattle on a weekend. Not for a conference, not for a meeting, but simply to see her son. She sat across from Theo, now a junior in high school, at a diner near his school. And for the first time in years, she told him the truth. That she was proud of the company she'd built, but that if she had to choose the empire or the years she'd missed with him, she would trade every dollar to have them back. She asked if he'd consider spending the summer with her in Chicago. He said yes. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still awkward silences, years of distance that didn't dissolve overnight. But it was a beginning. In beginnings, Vivian had learned from a warehouse coordinator with a lunchbox in his hand were worth showing up for. Daniel and Vivian never became close friends in the way movies like to dramatize these things. Their relationship stayed mostly professional, a nod in the hallway, an occasional check-in. But something had passed between them in that office that neither of them forgot. Years later, when Daniel was promoted to a regional operations director, a role he earned, not one that was handed to him, he kept a single object on his desk. Mia's old lunchbox, the same one he'd been carrying the day he almost lost everything. He kept it there as a reminder that the worst day of his professional life had also been the day someone chose to see him as a human being instead of a line item. Mia, for her part, grew up hearing the story in pieces, the way children absorb the important lessons of their parents' lives. Not all at once, but in fragments over years, at dinner tables and car rides. She's 14 now, and when people ask her what she wants to do when she grows up, she doesn't say CEO or doctor or lawyer. She says she wants a job where she gets to decide, someday, whether to be the kind of person who walks past someone who's struggling, or the kind who stops and says, "Please, don't go." That's the quiet truth this story leaves behind. Kindness rarely arrives with fanfare. It doesn't usually look like headlines or grand speeches. Most of the time, it looks like a hand on a sleeve in a hallway, 3 whispered words, a decision to see the person in front of you instead of the paperwork in your hand. Vivian Calloway didn't save Daniel Reyes because it was good for business. She did it because, for one unguarded moment, she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and she refused to let someone else feel that way if she had the power to stop it. We never know, walking through our own ordinary days, who around us is carrying something heavy behind a calm face. The coworker who seems distant might be sitting up all night with a sick parent. The stranger who seems short-tempered might be doing math in their head about rent. Kindness costs us so little most of the time, a moment, a sentence, a choice to pause, and yet it can be the exact thing that keeps someone from giving up. If this story moved you even a little, consider being someone's "please don't go" today. You don't need a title or a fortune to change the direction of someone's life. Sometimes all it takes is noticing. So look around you this week, at work, at home, in line at the grocery store, and ask yourself who might need someone to simply stop, turn around, and choose to see them. That's how kindness spreads. Not in grand gestures, but in waves, one small act at a time. Thank you for watching this story on Kindness Waves. If it touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder today that kindness still changes everything. We'll see you in the next story.